Hello everyone. Okay, in this video we're talking about ISTJs. What a great personality. Okay, ISTJs are incredibly smart, if I might just say like right at the beginning. I have yet to meet an ISTJ that's not incredibly smart, like in the book sense of the word smart. Really intelligent, really quick studies. They pick things up really quick, especially like in the book smart sense of the word. And they hold on to it. It's not like they just like learn quickly and then poof, it's gone. Like that stuff stays with them. Anyways, incredibly smart type. Very good with money type. I know some wealthy ISTJs. Okay, so let's get into it. So one thing to mention is that before Myers-Briggs, Carl Jung invented cognitive functions. And basically, when you think like cognitive function, it's basically like the way your brain functions. And they've since done studies, Dario Nardi has done studies that show that these cognitive functions kind of correspond to parts of the brain. So when they hooked different personalities up, certain personalities would rely on different regions of the brain more often than other types would. So he invented cognitive functions, and then later on, several years later, Myers and Briggs came along and they kind of gave names to these types. So like if you use this region and this region, we call you the ESFJ. If you use this region and this region, we call you the ISTJ. So the way you figure out what those regions are is it's kind of like a code. So your middle two letters are kind of the meat of the code, so the S and the T. So everyone's second letter is their perceiving letter. It's how you perceive information. It's how you learn information. So for ISTJs, that means you learn through senses. It means you maybe learn from other people or from stories or from books. You take it in, you churn it in, you process it, and you get kind of like a memory. So basically from everything you experience, you take it in, you churn, and that's kind of how you learn. So that's your perceiving letter. It's how you perceive. Everyone's third letter is considered their judging letter. So it's how you make judgments, and not judge like in a negative way, but just how you make decisions, how you think things should be. So for ISTJs, that's with thinking. They say that things should be efficient. Things should be done in an efficient, productive way. People should try to reach goals. People should try to improve. So those are kind of your middle two letters. So if you're a J, it means that you show the world, means you extrovert, you show the world your judging function. So your judging function is thinking. So it means you show the world your thinking function. So you come off initially more of like a thinker. You show the world your thinking process. That just automatically means you introvert your perceiving function, your second letter. So you kind of introvert your senses. You think about the impressions it made on you on the inside and the memories and things like that. Since you're an introvert, you prioritize the introverted one of those two, and then you secondarily prioritize the extroverted one. So it means you first prioritize introverted sensing, SI, and secondarily you prioritize extroverted thinking, which is TE. So those are your first two. That's kind of the first two regions of the brain, the first two cognitive functions. But everyone does predominantly use 4. So your second and your third function are just direct opposites of each other. They're kind of like a yin-yang. They're exact opposites of each other, but they do complement each other, and together they create a full picture. So the opposite of TE, the opposite of extroverted is introverted. The opposite of thinking is feeling. So FI is your third function, introverted feeling. And then your fourth function is the direct opposite of your first function. Since your first function is introverted sensing, the opposite of introverted is extroverted. The opposite of sensing is intuition. So extroverted intuition is your fourth function. And I should clarify about what I mean by introversion and extroversion. The way the everyday public uses the words introversion, extroversion is a little bit different than how people use it in the Myers-Briggs community. Like if you just Google introvert, I believe the definition is a reserved, shy person, which is not really what we're talking about here. It means to turn inward or to turn outward. So I saw one comment the other day and they said, no, I do not want to extrovert more because people find my introvert side charismatic. And by definition, if you're around people, if people are finding you charismatic, that by definition means you're turning outward. If you're talking to people and they're finding you charismatic, you're extroverting in that moment. You might consider yourself to be an introvert, but as soon as you're turning outward and talking to people, you are extroverting. So what that person was saying was, I don't want to extrovert because people already find me charismatic, but really he's already extroverting. So everyone's first function is kind of like a dominant strength. They use it all the time, 99% of the time. Everyone's second function is a potential strength. It's kind of underutilized, but it really is a potential strength. Everyone's third function tends to be overutilized, kind of in a bad way, especially the younger you are, the more likely people tend to be using this function and in a bad way. And then everyone's fourth function is underutilized, and it is a weakness, but it could be bumped up a little better and you could kind of sprinkle it in your life a little bit more than done so already. It tends to be kind of shut off, but it'd be good to bump it up a little bit. Like maybe if you use it 2% of the time, maybe start to use it 10% of the time. So just sprinkle it into your life. So ISTJ's first cognitive function is introverted sensing. And this is all about taking the senses in, things you experience, and then churning it inside. It's introverted. So you take your senses and then you introvert it. So maybe you hang out with people, you go on a vacation, and then the dominant thing you do is you churn it around in your mind and you play it back, kind of like a memory. And that's kind of like almost more fun for introverted sensors. It's that time when you get to be by yourself and you think about everything that happened. Or maybe you go on vacation and then at the end of the day, everyone goes back to the hotel and you talk about everything you did that day. It's kind of like a reliving it. And it's like that reliving time that's so fun for ISTJs, where they get to think about the implications and what they enjoyed and relive everything again. And part of why they like that is because ISJs can be a little bit like safety conscious. And when you're reliving something, you already know how everything turned out. And it's like a little bit safer. And you're an introvert, so you like to do things alone anyways. It can make people very loyal, very responsible. This is where I said they're like very good with money. ISJs in general are pretty good with money. Good memories, really, they hang on to very specific facts. They hang on to stories, specific facts. A lot of ISJs are very good at games like Trivial Pursuit. Maybe you don't feel like you're good at trivia, but think about yourself in relation to other people around you of your same age, and you're probably like, oh yeah, I'm probably better than everyone my same age. They're very good at like games like Trivial Pursuit, really book smart, really good at learning. Introverted sensors really enjoy learning and pick things up very quickly. Introverted sensors can be a very diverse group of people because, everyone has a diverse life. Everyone grew up somewhere different, with different parents and different siblings and had all these different experiences. And for introverted sensors, their experiences, when you add up all their experiences, that adds up to who they are. And so some types have a vibe to them. Like I can really caricature and say, this type looks like this a lot of the time, but for introverted sensors, they're a little bit more of a diverse group because they're created by their diverse experiences. That's the function they use almost all the time. They're constantly, they're in their mind thinking about everything that's happened that day and making meaning from it and taking their impressions from it. So their second function is kind of an underutilized strength. And the reason it's underutilized is because it's extroverted. And if you're an introvert, you don't prefer to be extroverted as much, so you're going to have a little bit of a hesitancy to go toward extroversion. In my opinion, introversion and extroversion are both needs. And the analogy I use is that introversion and extroversion are both needs in the same way that food and water are both needs. And you may have a preference for food over water, like you might prefer one, but at the end of the day, you need both. You need both to survive and have a meaningful life. And I think that is how it is for introversion and extroversion. You have a preference for one, you definitely prefer introversion. And that's what's gonna maybe give you energy and the most fulfillment. But the extroverted part of you is what's gonna give you fulfillment in your life and impact. Because what introversion does for you is it gives you depth and wisdom and clarity, and it slows you down and makes you really process and turn things over and think things through. And what extroversion gives you is impact. You get out in the world, you have relationships, you have a meaningful life. At the end of your life, you know that you impacted the world. And with too much introversion, you're just isolated and you lose impact. And with too much extroverted, like extroverts will tend to be too scattered, lacking the depth and the clarity. So even though it stretches you to get into extroversion and it's not maybe going to give you energy, it's not your preference, it really is a good growth spot. It'll stretch you out of your comfort zone. It'll give you fulfillment and it'll give you impact. It's like you need input, you need output, input, output, input, output. And when you have too much or one or the other, it leaves you depleted. So what this second function gives you is a little bit of extroversion. And it's not the party animal type of extroversion. Of all of the extroverted functions, this one seems the least stereotypically extroverted in my opinion. It's really about being productive, setting goals. It's what does the group think about things? What would a podcaster say about this? What would a book say about this? What do authority figures say about this? And then I'm going to improve and get better and better and better and better until I'm an optimized person. So I'm going to set goals. I'm going to be productive. I want to up my revenue 15% by the end of quarter 2. That's kind of an extroverted thinking thing to say. Based on numbers and what works in the outer world, you're going to try to achieve goals. You're going to try to regulate output, lead people, So it is oriented toward the outer world, but it's not necessarily very people-y. So for ISTJs, extroverted thinking is a really good thing to work on because it gets you like out in the world. One thing I think is that ISTJs make phenomenal leaders, especially when they have the bravery enough to get into extroverted thinking and to actually lead people, because extroverted thinking is all about what does the group think about things? What does the group think is efficient? What does the group say makes a good leader? How should I lead people? How should I initiate projects and get the ball rolling? And I know some phenomenal ISTJ leaders. I think sometimes ISTJs are hesitant to get into leadership because they don't feel like they're qualified enough. And then at the same time, I've heard a lot of ISTJs complain about their bosses. They're like, oh, this boss is not great. And they don't feel like they would do a good job stepping into leadership. But when you look around at everyone else, they would do a better job than like almost anyone out there. ISTJs make incredible leaders. And I think if they have the bravery and the guts to take the risk and say, you know what, I'm not qualified, but really neither is anyone else. So if I just don't compare myself to the ideal of what I think I need to be, just set your standards a little lower and just say, compared to all these people, could I do it better? And the answer is yes. I mean, ISTJs are incredibly reliable and they get stuff done and they do the things that they say they're going to do. And I have never met an unkind ISTJ. They're incredibly kind to people and I think would make really good bosses. One of my bosses was an ISTJ, I think. Great boss. Incredibly kind, had a little bit of a funny side that maybe you wouldn't expect. Yeah, and very empowering. Also, randomly, I've seen a lot of YouTubers who are STJs because they stick with it. I think an ISTJ might not be that likely to get into YouTube because it's a little bit of a far shot. It's not reliable. I think ISTJs don't really want careers that are perceived as risky. But if an ISTJ can get over the idea that it's risky, they excel because they have the longevity. They work really hard and consistently. They work very hard and very consistently to a very high level to the point where they do really well. And a lot of successful YouTubers that I can think of are SJs because they really just have the longevity and they work hard. And if they can get over... I think the ISTJs are a type that would survive well in a risky career. If they can get over the idea of it being risky, I think they would excel. A lot of types most likely to get into risky careers are maybe not the types that have as good of a work ethic as ISTJs do, and so maybe that's why certain careers get a bad rap being a starving artist. But I think if an ISTJ wanted to be an artist, for example, they would work hard, and they would do it in a responsible way. They would take a calculated risk. So yeah, that's just kind of like a side note. And what extroverted thinking does is it gives you a sense of bravery, risk-taking, and it gives you impact in the world. If ISTJs become too introverted, they really lose their impact and they lose the brilliance of what an ISTJ has to offer. If an ISTJ is a little unhealthy, they'll become a little bit more reserved. They won't be so initiating. They'll respond to people, but they might not be initiating. And the third function is where people can tend to get tripped up. The third function is where people go when they're in arguments sometimes. They tend to overuse it because it's introverted. So if you're an ISTJ, you're an introvert, you like being introverted, so you have a tendency to go to this third function. But it really is a weakness for ISTJs, same for INTJs. And what I've noticed when ISTJs are in what's called a loop, it's when you're in your first and third function, that's called a loop. And when they're in this loop, they can be bitter, they can complain a lot about their bosses. They might say, I'm in this group project at work and everyone's dropping the ball, so I have to make sure it gets done. And they're kind of with SI, with introverted sensing, they're taking the responsibility and make sure things get done. But with introverted feeling, they're kind of complaining about it and I have to do it and I have to be a martyr. Sometimes introverted feelers can be kind of like martyrs. Like, I just have to sacrifice myself and this is what I have to do. Make them bitter, prideful, alone. INTJs have some of these same issues. And it really makes them lose their impact. When you're so in introversion, it makes people not want to be around you because introverted sensing can be a little pessimistic if it's not balanced out. It's so realistic that sometimes when it's used in a bad way, it becomes then like pessimistic. And introverted feeling will lead ITJs to kind of whine about things and to pick out the problems, but they lose the work ethic and the initiative to then solve those problems. And they just kind of dwell on their problems and I guess it's never going to be solved and this is just how things are. And they get really just like deeply like entrenched in their comfort zone and, isolated, hanging out by themselves, not moving anywhere in their career. Where extroverted thinking can really help them make significant gains in their career. This is where the ISTJs I know that have worked on extroverted thinking can make a lot of money because they make good investment choices, really good with property. Property is not always a good investment, but, if you do it wisely and think through it like ISTJs would, you can end up making some good money on property and real estate is what I mean. So their fourth function is extroverted intuition. It's all about kind of the what if. So it's the what if, and it's oriented outside itself. And it's saying, what are the possibilities? What new things could we try? What could we create? What could we envision? What are the possibilities? Extrovert intuition is very bubbly. It's a very happy function. And in ISTJs, it's most often turned off. Maybe they use it like 2% of the time. And in my opinion, you should boost it up, sprinkle it into your life a little bit, maybe to 10%. You're not going to become an ENP, but just integrate it a little bit in your life. And what that'll do is it gives you a little optimism and fun. I know a lot of ISTJs who really enjoy vacations, and I think that comes from this function. You want to try new things. I know a lot of ISTJs that like to vacation in the same spot every time. So maybe every year at the same time of year, they like to go to Hawaii. And maybe they'll spice it up a little bit by trying a new island in Hawaii. But still, it's kind of like the same. It's just repetition because it's almost more fun for them the second time they go places. They love to relive things, but then that extrovert intuition makes it a little bit new. I noticed this extrovert intuition can make them a little bit crafty, like maybe they like a paint and sip or to do pottery. I know a lot of ISTJs who like to do puzzles. It's kind of like these little creative things, especially when someone is guiding them, I've noticed. Like at a paint and sip, someone's telling you the steps, and ISTJs, like I said, are really good learners, quick studies, and I've noticed that sort of thing is fun for them. Same thing with a puzzle. It's like there's a guidance to it, but then you can kind of make this creative thing. What this does, it makes you open to new experiences. It would make you open to try something risky, like a risky career, something you perceive to be a risky career. Maybe it's something deep down in your heart you really want to do, but because it's so risky, you don't want to do it. But with a little bit of extroverted intuition, maybe it would push you to do it. Because I've noticed that people's fourth function, one, whispers at their aspirations, but two, it's kind of turned off a lot of the time. You're using it 2% of the time. And so it's kind of hard to actually get to that aspiration because this thing is turned off. Where if you turn it on just a little bit, you get the optimism and the drive to get there. So I think some advice for ISTJs is to work on their two extroverted functions, predominantly extroverted thinking, really try to bump that up. Or maybe people use their second function in one area of life. You use it at work and that's it. As soon as you come home, it's gone. As soon as you hang out with friends, it's gone. So try to use extroverted thinking in many contexts of your life. Use extroverted thinking in your finances, with your friends, the way you clean your house, the way you, if you have pets, just really try to get into extroverted thinking. And what that does is you will not bear so much responsibility because if you use extroverted thinking, secondly, and you're not really using it to its full potential, you're going to end up taking responsibility for things. If you're in a group project, you're going to have to do all of it by yourself. You're going to bear this heavy load. But what good extroverted thinkers do is they work on delegating. And if you're the boss, you could control, and there would be consequences to people's actions. And you'd make sure that everyone's doing their part, and you could maybe be in charge of hiring to make sure these type of people don't get hired because you saw it coming. This person was going to be like that. I think it's great for ISTJs to move up and be in positions of leadership because you will do it with a high level of excellence. And that will not lead you to complain so much about how things are being run. Because the truth is, people are not going to run things as excellent as you run them. If you can convince yourself to step into higher positions of leadership, I think it will really do a lot for your mood. And if you sprinkle in extroverted intuition, maybe you can do a career that's a little bit out of your comfort zone that you've always wanted to do. It'll let you have more fun in your life. Sometimes TJs can be workaholics, and this could help you integrate more fun in your life, hang out with more friends, go on vacations. I've noticed ISTJs like to get souvenirs. I think it's a little bit of introverted sensing. They always come back with like little souvenirs. Everywhere they go, they have like this little souvenir. And extrovert intuition would give you some inventiveness that if you're in a leadership role, you have the introverted sensing, you're reliable, you get things done, you're there for the people that work for you, but also give you a sense of inventiveness to say, you know what, I've reliably done this, but you can slowly start to integrate new ways to do things that people have not done before that you think would be a better, more efficient way to do things, and you can start integrating that. I've known ISTJs that they're usually in lessons. Like I know one ISTJ that's in piano lessons, and she's in her late 40s. I know another ISTJ who's in drum lessons. Like I think it's really good for ISTJs to just continue learning. That kind of hones your extroverted thinking, and your introverted sensing. It also gives a little bit of fun, like when you're taking lessons, maybe with extrovert intuition, do it in a fun way. But ISTJs are incredibly deep. I think ISTJs are one of the types that like the 16 Personalities website, other websites have done a great disservice to, because they make ISTJs sound so bland and boring, but they're really not. Like, the way I describe it is ISTJs have like a little ENFP inside them, just a little bit. They're mostly an ISTJ, but they got a little ENFP inside them. And ENFPs would be the opposites. ENFPs have a little ISTJ inside them. And ISTJs, they tend to be reserved at first, but when they really open up, there's like a real fullness to ISTJs. They're really the whole package. Like, a lot of times they've got their finances together, making a lot of money, and they're a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun to have parties with, and you can have really deep intellectual conversations with them. I feel like sometimes in the Myers-Briggs community, people are like, Ns are the only ones who have deep conversations, and it's just a bunch of BS. ISTJs are very deep. I have all sorts of very deep conversations with some ISTJs I know. I had a lot of fun. I watched the movie Tenet with an INTP and an ISTJ, and it was like every 10 minutes we would stop and we would have this really thorough, like, in-depth conversation about it, like noticing plot holes and really just like getting the thoughts going about like the implications of different things. So they think very deeply about things. Very quick learners. They make a lot of money, very deep. Because they have feeling in their third spot, it makes them kind of well-rounded. They're responsible and good with their body, and they're also very intellectual, but then because feeling's in their third spot, they're also very good with being empathetic, and they'll listen to people and be really good listeners. Like, I find ISTJs to be a very good, well-rounded personality that you can have fun with in a lot of different contexts, as long as they're not unhealthy. I mean, any type that's unhealthy is annoying to get along with, I mean, honestly. If you ask people that aren't really into Myers-Briggs, ENFPs are kind of like the fan favorite among like non-niche people. It seems like a lot of people really like ENFPs. If you look at any sort of like blog article that's like, what is this type's favorite romantic partner? And you'll get ENFP over and over and over again. And since ISTJs are kind of the opposite of ENFPs, I feel like they kind of get like the shaft, and it's just such a bummer because I feel like they're really misunderstood. Any types that have introverted sensing, they will learn you. And so they like learn what you like, and the ISJs are the types that the relationship gets better and better and better and better over time. Because at the beginning they haven't really figured you out, but because they're quick studies and they figure people out, they're just more and more fun as time goes on, in my opinion. And once they get more comfortable with people, they really open up. They're a type that really is kind of slow to open up, but is really amazing once you get to know them. They're kind of one of the types that I would imagine would really hate to like small talk. They're a type that I would think would hate small talk a lot. Their unique gift to the world is excellent leadership and just excellence in general. I really admire ISTJs that I've been under. One of my principals was an ISTJ. The teacher that I taught under in student teaching was an ISTJ. And they do things very streamlined and creative. I mean, the ISTJ that I was under was actually one of the most creative math teachers that I've ever seen. And he included tons of color and tons of pictures and tons of manipulatives. And he would go to math trainings and he would really thoroughly digest the information at every math training he went to for 20 years. And it's really created a really excellent math teacher in him. He also, for a few years, went to Japan to teach, which is a little bit of extroverted intuition. That was a great time for him to explore, open up his boundaries. I think it's great for ISTJs to move away for a little bit. I know a lot of ISTJs that live close to their parents. ISTJs really have close bonds with their parents in general, and they're a little nervous about stepping outside the realms of what's safe and where they're from. But I think if they move away for a while, that really is good for them. And then, if you turn out to not like the place, if you really do like the place you're from, come back. You can always come back. The decisions are not permanent. ISTJs are a great type. I really enjoy my time hanging out with them, especially the longer and longer I have relationships with these types. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I do have a Myers-Briggs 101 playlist, if you're interested in that. I do also have an Instagram account where I post, it's a little bit more intro level things, and it's more like list things. So it's kind of a different type of content that I share there, whereas here it's more of a deep dive. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those things, go ahead and check it out. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.